Part 1. The Fateful Encounter. The city sparkled under LED lights, a vibrant urban painting on a weekend night. The streets were bustling with traffic, car horns blending with the deep bass beats echoing from nearby clubs. Elias Kane drove his sleek black Porsche through the crowded roads, his steel gray eyes skimming over the reflections on the windshield. At 34, he was a name impossible to ignore in the entertainment industry, the CEO of Kane Entertainment, the powerhouse behind grand music events and chart-topping hits. With slick-back black hair, a tall, commanding figure wrapped in a perfectly tailored suit, Elias exuded confidence and authority. But beneath that alluring exterior lay a cold heart, one that had never once wavered for anyone. To him, love was a luxury, unnecessary in a world of numbers and contracts. Today had been a long day. Hours of meetings with investors had been spent debating Kane Entertainment's expansion into the Asian market. Elias had maintained his composed demeanor, but inside he was a storm of tension. He had no desire to go home. The lavish penthouse atop a towering glass skyscraper only made him feel emptier. Instead, he chose to drive aimlessly through the city, searching for something to ease his mind. And then, as if by fate, he found himself stopping in front of the Art District, a little-known corner of the city where graffiti-covered walls and underground clubs hid among aging buildings. Elias stepped out of his car, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, his gaze sweeping over a narrow alleyway leading to a black-painted door with messy scrawled letters. Pulse. This was a well-known underground club among indie artists, a place he occasionally visited for fresh inspiration. The pulse of electronic music filled the air as he pushed open the door, the scent of alcohol and cigarette smoke mingling in the atmosphere. The crowd inside wasn't overwhelming, but it was enough to create a lively energy. Rebels in leather jackets, artists with brightly dyed hair, and curious eyes flicking toward him as he walked in. And then he saw her. At the center of a small stage under flickering lights, a girl was dancing. Not the polished, choreographed movements of the performers under Kane Entertainment, but something raw, untamed, a story told through motion. Her long silver hair, an exceptionally rare natural shade, gleamed under the interplay of red and purple lights, like a living galaxy. Her deep green eyes were filled with intense focus, and her slender yet strong figure, clad in a tight black outfit, radiated a quiet power. She wasn't just dancing, she was commanding the light, the beams shifting with her every step, as if they were an extension of her body. Elias stood still, hands in his pockets, his eyes locked onto her. He had seen hundreds of performers, but none had ever made him feel like this, as if an electric current had jolted through his spine, awakening something he hadn't known he possessed. Who was she? A freelance dancer, perhaps, but the way she moved with the music and the light made him think she was far more than just a performer. As the song ended, she bowed slightly, her silver hair cascading down to obscure her face, while the crowd erupted in applause. Elias did not clap. He simply stood there, watching, like a predator who had just found its prey. Nova Sterling stepped down from the stage, the thick soles of her boots echoing against the worn wooden floor. At 27, she was a free spirit, never settling in one place, drifting from city to city to perform and work. She made a living through dancing and stage lighting design jobs that allowed her to stay unattached. Nova's past was a deep scar. Her family had abandoned her as a child, selling her to an entertainment company to pay off their debts. She had escaped, refusing to ever let anyone control her again. Her naturally silver hair, the result of partial albinism, made her stand out, but it was also a constant reminder of the difference that had pushed her away from her family's embrace. As she made her way toward the bar, a group of drunken spectators blocked her path. "Hey, silver-haired girl, dance for us again," one of them slurred, reaching for her arm. Nova stepped back, her gaze sharp. "Move," she said, her voice low but laced with warning. But the man didn't stop. His friends laughed, and another one snatched the backpack that held her lighting equipment. Elias had been watching from a distance, initially not planning to intervene. He wasn't the type to play hero, but there was something in her eyes, a resilience mixed with old wounds that made him step forward. "You should stop," he said, his deep voice commanding, his steel gray eyes glinting like cold metal. The thugs turned, ready to argue, but the sheer presence of Elias made them hesitate. He didn't need to fight, just one look, a few words, and they backed off, returning the backpack to Nova before slinking away. Nova studied him, her gaze assessing. He was nearly a head taller than her, his black suit tailored to perfection over his solid frame, and the faint scent of woodsy cologne caught her off guard. "I didn't need your help," she said, her tone sharp, though curiosity flickered beneath it. Elias smirked, the corner of his lips curving in a lazy, arrogant smile. "Consider me bored. So what now? A thank you or another glare?" She frowned, then shrugged. "Fine, a drink, to settle the debt." She gestured for him to join her at the bar. Elias accepted, his gaze never leaving her as she ordered 2 shots of tequila. Their conversation began with playful defiance. "You don't seem like someone who frequents places like this," Nova noted, taking a sip, her eyes flicking over his expensive suit. Elias chuckled softly. "And you don't seem like someone who invites strangers for drinks. So what's your life like? Dancing and running?" Nova stiffened for a second, but then let out a cold laugh. "Better than living in a gilded cage like you. Kane Entertainment, right? I know who you are." Elias was surprised but didn't show it. "Then you know I could give you the world if you wanted it." Nova shook her head. "I don't need your world. I like my freedom." Despite the sharp words, the tension between them shifted. Elias found himself drawn to Nova's untamed spirit, while she sensed something rare beneath his polished exterior, something real. When the club closed, heavy rain had begun to fall outside. Elias offered to take her home. "I don't have a home," Nova replied, her eyes glinting with a quiet challenge. "But if you don't mind getting wet, come with me." She led him through a dark alley to an abandoned warehouse nearby her temporary refuge. Inside, the space was transformed into a makeshift lighting studio, LED strips hanging across the walls, old stage equipment stacked in corners, and a small bed tucked to the side. Elias looked around, impressed but silent. Nova switched on a strip of violet light, the glow illuminating her face, making her green eyes stand out even more. "This is where I stay when I'm in this city," she said, her voice softer than usual. The air between them grew thick, an invisible pull drawing them closer. Elias stepped forward, fingers brushing against a strand of LED light, but his eyes remained locked on her. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," he murmured, his voice deep and rough. Nova smirked. "So are you, but don't think I'm staying." She barely finished her sentence before Elias pulled her in, his lips crashing against hers in a sudden, intense kiss. Nova responded instinctively, unable to resist the heat surging between them. The kiss deepened, leading them toward the small bed amidst the flickering lights. That night, they lost control in a storm of passion, clothes discarded on the floor, bodies tangled as if there were no tomorrow. But when Elias realized Nova was a virgin, the slight hesitation in her movements, the flicker of surprise in her eyes, he froze for a brief moment. He had assumed she was an experience-free spirit, but this revelation stirred something more than just desire in him. A deep, possessive instinct awakened, as if she had just become an inseparable part of him. By morning, Elias woke in the narrow bed, weak sunlight filtering through a cracked window. He reached for her, but she was gone. All that remained was a violet LED strip on the pillow, a trace of her left behind. He sat up, his gaze darkening, his fingers tightening around the sheets. She had run. But Elias Kane was not a man who let things slip away easily. A slow, cold smile curved on his lips as he stood, stepping out of the warehouse with a single thought in mind. "You won't escape me," he murmured, determined to find Nova Sterling, the woman who had unknowingly stolen a part of his soul. "Welcome to Soul Stories. Life can be overwhelming, but here we share heartfelt tales to bring you peace, joy, and inspiration. Your support, every comment, like, and follow means the world to us. It motivates us to create more meaningful and uplifting stories just for you. Did our latest story touch your heart? Leave a "I am happy" in the comments if you agree. Subscribe now and be part of a community that spreads love, kindness, and positivity. Let's make every day a little brighter together. Part 2. The Obsession Begins. The dim morning light filtered through the cracks of the broken warehouse window, casting soft shadows across Elias Kane's chiseled face as he stepped outside. His polished leather shoes sank slightly into the damp earth, leaving deep imprints in the thin layer of mud left behind by the previous night's rain. He paused, inhaling deeply, the icy air filling his lungs, but it did nothing to chase away the hollow emptiness gnawing at him. In his hand was the violet LED strip Nova Sterling had left on the pillow, a small, fragile thing. Yet now it felt like a vivid memory, an invisible tether binding him to the silver-haired girl who had vanished without a trace. Elias didn't go straight back to his penthouse. He had no desire to face the cold silence of his luxurious apartment, where the glass walls and minimalist decor only made his loneliness more pronounced. Instead, he drove his sleek black Porsche through the bustling streets, his steel-gray eyes flickering over the neon glow of the city. He stopped in front of the Kane Entertainment headquarters, a gleaming glass tower in the heart of downtown, a symbol of power and success that he had built over the past decade. But today, as he entered his private office on the top floor, his mind wasn't on contracts or business strategies. It was consumed entirely by Nova. Elias's office was vast, with a sleek ebony desk at its center and towering glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city skyscrapers glowing in the distance, traffic crawling below like tiny ants. He tossed his suit jacket onto a leather chair, sat down, and powered up his computer, his long fingers typing rapidly across the keyboard. His gaze was sharp with cold determination, but inside he felt nothing but chaos. He couldn't explain why one night with Nova had unraveled him like this. Elias Kane had always been a man of logic. Every relationship in his life, from business partners to fleeting lovers, had been calculated, mere pieces on a chessboard under his control. But Nova was beyond his reach. She had disappeared like the wind, leaving behind an emptiness he couldn't fill, and it was driving him insane. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Get the tech team up here. Now," he ordered, his voice low and unyielding. Minutes later, the automatic glass doors slid open, and 5 of Kane Entertainment's top data analysts and security experts entered dressed in hoodies and jeans, carrying laptops, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension as they faced their notoriously ruthless CEO. Elias stood, bracing his hands against the desk, his gray eyes scanning each of them like a predator assessing its prey. "I need you to find someone," he said, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "A woman, about 27, silver hair natural, not dyed, green eyes, slender but strong. She's a dancer, possibly a stage lighting designer. Her name is Nova Sterling. Use security footage, social media, whatever resources you need. I want to know where she is, and I want to know now." A younger technician, messy-haired and bespectacled, hesitated before speaking. "Mr. Kane, we'll need more details to narrow the search. Does she have any distinguishing features? Social media accounts? An address? Anything?" "Find her," Elias cut in, his voice sharp as ice, his eyes flashing with something dangerously close to obsession. "I don't care how. Use facial recognition. Hack surveillance cameras if necessary. I want results in 24 hours. Now go." The team nodded, not daring to question him further, and quickly left the room. Elias sat back in his chair, turning toward the window, his gaze distant yet burning with an unfamiliar fixation. He imagined Nova dancing under the lights he created, red and violet beams weaving around her body like a performance meant solely for him. He shook his head, trying to dispel the image, but it kept returning, clearer and more vivid each time. "What are you doing to me, Nova?" he murmured, fingers tightening around the violet LED strip until his knuckles turned white. 30 kilometers outside the city, Nova Sterling sat in a rundown motel room on the outskirts of town. The walls were peeling, stained yellow with age. The room furnished only with a single bed covered in worn sheets and a scratched wooden table. Neon red light from a flickering motel sign outside spilled through the window, casting a ghostly glow over her silver hair, making it shimmer like moonlight on water. She opened her laptop, fingers moving swiftly over the keyboard as she worked on a new lighting design for an upcoming performance at the Outer Fringe Music Festival. Music pulsed through her headphones, but her green eyes weren't truly focused on the screen. They were clouded, lost in a memory she desperately wanted to erase last night, with Elias Kane. She cursed herself under her breath. "You're such an idiot, Nova," she muttered, slamming the laptop shut with a sharp clack. Why had she let him into her world? One night with Elias had been the biggest mistake she had ever made. For the past 10 years, she had lived freely, escaping every chain that tried to bind her, whether it was family, contracts, or the cruel system that once owned her. Elias Kane, with his expensive suits, intoxicating cologne, and those piercing, steel-gray eyes, was everything she feared, an embodiment of the world she had spent a lifetime running from. A world where she had once been forced to dance and design lights until she collapsed from exhaustion as a 12-year-old girl. A world where her family had sold her to an entertainment company to pay off their debts. She had escaped on her 16th birthday, vowing never to let anyone control her again. And yet Elias had shattered those walls in a single night. Nova pushed herself up from the bed and stepped onto the motel's tiny balcony, letting the cold wind bite into her skin. The air smelled of diesel from the nearby highway, but at least it cleared her head. She needed to forget him, needed to focus on her life, the one no one else could touch. But every time she closed her eyes, she felt the warmth of his hands on her waist, heard his deep, rasping voice whisper against her ear, "You're unlike anyone I've ever met." The words cut through her like a blade, both sweet and dangerous. "No," she told herself, gripping the rusted metal railing. "He's just another rich, arrogant bastard. He'll forget about you. He has to forget about you." But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Elias Kane wasn't the kind of man who let things go easily. She had seen it in the way he looked at her, like a predator fixated on its prey. He remained in his office, checking emails, reviewing reports from the tech team, but every passing minute without news of Nova made him more restless. He paced back and forth, hands in his pockets, his eyes never leaving the city below. By nightfall, he sat on the sleek leather couch in the corner of his office, a glass of whiskey in hand, but he didn't drink. His gaze remained locked on the violet LED strip lying on his desk. Eventually, exhaustion pulled him into a light sleep, and in his dreams, she appeared. Nova, dancing in the darkness, her body illuminated only by the lights he controlled, red and violet beams wrapping around her like ribbons of fire. She turned to him, her green eyes glimmering, and smiled a smile both soft and defiant. Elias jolted awake, sweat dampening his forehead, his heartbeat erratic. With a sharp bang, he slammed his fist against the desk. He needed to find her, not because of fleeting desire, but because of something deeper, something he couldn't name, a fixation that was growing stronger with every second. The next morning, his tech team finally delivered a message. "We found her. Nova Sterling is performing at the Outer Fringe Music Festival tonight, 8 p.m., main stage." Elias shot up from his chair, his eyes burning with a renewed fire. Without hesitation, he grabbed his suit jacket, stepped into his car, and drove straight to the festival, a repurposed industrial site 40 minutes outside the city, now transformed into a chaotic wonderland of temporary stages, neon-painted walls, and a sea of eccentric festival-goers moving under flashing lights. And somewhere in that crowd was Nova. He would find her. When Elias arrived, the festival was already in full swing. Electronic music pulsed through the air, the deep bass vibrating through the ground, while lights from various small stages flickered over the wild dancing crowd. He pushed through the sea of bodies, his steel-gray eyes scanning the chaos, girls with neon-dyed hair, men covered in piercings, street artists shouting lyrics through portable speakers. And then he saw her. On a stage in the middle of an open lot, beneath crimson and teal LED strip lights, she had designed herself. Nova danced. Her movements were fluid yet powerful, her silver hair cascading through the night like a waterfall of light. Her dance wasn't just movement, it was a story, a release, and Elias felt his pulse quicken, as if she were pulling him into a world he had never known. He stood in the crowd, motionless, his gaze locked onto her. His black suit was out of place amidst the gritty festival attire surrounding him, but he didn't care about the curious glances or whispered comments. He only saw Nova the way she spun, the way the lights embraced her like a lover, the way she seemed to belong to a world far beyond his reach. As the music faded, she bowed slightly, her silver hair falling over her face, and the crowd erupted into applause. Elias didn't clap. He just stood there waiting, his breath heavy. Nova stepped down from the stage, wiping the sweat from her brow with the sleeve of her fitted black top. Her thick-soled boots thudded softly against the makeshift wooden platform. The crowd still cheered, but she didn't linger for compliments. She slung her backpack over her shoulder, moving quickly, just as she always did after a performance. But then, a tall figure blocked her path. Elias Kane stood there, his gray eyes glinting under the flashing festival lights, his sharp features more defined in the shadows. "Nova," he said, his deep voice steady and unwavering, her name rolling off his tongue like a declaration. Nova froze, her eyes flashing with both wariness and disbelief. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold but betraying the slight tremor beneath it. Elias took a step closer, unbothered by the curious onlookers. "You left without a word," he said, his tone calm but carrying an unrelenting weight. "I need to know why. Why did you run from me?" Nova scoffed, turning her head away, her silver hair cascading over her shoulder. "I don't belong to you or anyone, Elias Kane. Don't waste your time." But Elias didn't let her escape. He reached out, grasping her wrist not forcefully, but with just enough strength to keep her from slipping away. She inhaled sharply, their eyes locking, and the space between them shrank until she could feel his warmth against her skin. "You changed me," he murmured, his voice husky, raw with something undeniable. "One night with you, and I can't let go. Don't you see that?" Nova stared into his eyes, her breathing uneven. She wanted to pull away, to flee as she always did. But something in his gaze, something fierce, almost wounded, held her in place. And then, like a storm breaking free, Elias closed the distance, his lips crashing against hers in a searing, urgent kiss. The crowd around them faded. There was only the flashing lights of the festival, the pounding rhythm of her heart, and the taste of him warm, intoxicating, impossible to ignore. For a fleeting moment, Nova kissed him back, her fingers gripping the fabric of his suit, her body melting into his as if drawn by instinct. But then reality hit her like a cold slap. She shoved him away, her eyes wide with panic. "Don't do that," she whispered, her voice trembling, her lips still burning from his touch. Before Elias could react, she spun on her heels and disappeared into the festival's darkened alleyways. The last thing he saw was the glimmer of her silver hair under the neon lights before she was gone. Elias stood still, his hand tingling from where he had touched her, his breath unsteady. Slowly his fingers curled into a fist, and a slow smile spread across his lips, not his usual arrogant smirk, but something darker, something laced with obsession. He pulled out his phone, dialing his team. His voice was calm, but his words were edged with command. "Track her. I don't want her slipping away again. Find out everything, her past, her present, every detail." He knew he was crossing a line, but he didn't care. Nova had ignited something inside him, something he couldn't extinguish, and he wouldn't stop until she belonged to him. The next day, Elias received a detailed report from his tech team. They had hacked into old databases, uncovering Nova Sterling's buried past records of a young girl sold by her family to a small entertainment company at the age of 12, forced to dance and design lights until exhaustion, and escape at 16. From then on, she had lived as a ghost, no identity, no attachments. Elias sat in his office, reading every word on the screen, his expression darkening. He pictured her as a child, a silver-haired girl, used and discarded by a cruel world. And something deep inside him twisted a possessive, consuming need, not just to find her, but to protect her, to keep her. He stood by the window, gazing out at the city lights below, his fingers wrapped around the violet LED strip she had left behind. "You are my light," he murmured, his voice low and haunting, a vow whispered into the darkness. He no longer just wanted to find Nova. He wanted to make her his, no matter the cost. Part 3. The unexpected proposal. The city stretched beneath Elias Kane like an endless carpet of light, the skyscrapers glimmering through the massive glass windows of his penthouse. From the top floor of Kane Entertainment's headquarters, he stood before the window, a glass of whiskey in hand, his steel-gray eyes darkened by an obsession he could no longer hide. Nova Sterling, the enigmatic silver-haired woman who had vanished from the underground music festival the night before, remained at the center of his thoughts. Elias had never been a man to let emotions dictate his actions, But Nova had shattered every rule he had set for himself, and he would not allow her to escape again. After she had fled, Elias had acted swiftly. Wielding the full power of Kane Entertainment, he ordered his legal and financial teams to acquire the small performance venues Nova frequented, underground clubs, repurposed warehouses, and independent stages on the city's outskirts. He systematically canceled her bookings, not to destroy her career, but to force her to confront him. Elias knew he was playing a dangerous game, but he had no other choice. She was the light he couldn't live without, and he would do whatever it took to keep her. Meanwhile, in a rundown motel on the city's outskirts, Nova Sterling sat on a creaking bed, her green eyes fixed on her laptop screen. The emails kept coming one after another, notifying her that her performances had been abruptly canceled. Each message was another blade slicing through the freedom she held so dearly. "Elias Kane," she muttered, her voice laced with fury and helplessness. She knew he was behind this. No one else had the power or the motive to pull something like this. Her fists clenched, her silver hair falling over her face as frustration swelled inside her. She wanted to run like she always did, but this time, there was nowhere left to go. That night, as Nova stepped out of the motel into the dimly lit alley, a sleek black SUV rolled to a stop in front of her. Three men in tailored black suits stepped out, their movements precise and professional. "Miss Sterling?" One of them spoke, his voice even and controlled. "Mr. Kane would like to see you. Please come with us." Nova took a step back, her eyes flashing with defiance. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, gripping the strap of her backpack. But the man merely tilted his head, signaling to his colleagues. Before she could react, they guided her into the car, firm, yet not forceful. Nova didn't fight back. She knew it would be pointless. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows as the SUV sped toward its destination, Elias's penthouse. When the elevator doors slid open, Nova stepped into a world far removed from her own. Polished hardwood floors gleamed under soft lighting. Minimalist yet luxurious furniture filled the vast space, and the towering glass walls revealed a breathtaking panorama of the city skyline. Elias stood near the window, his back turned to her. Dressed in a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, he was no longer the impeccably composed CEO. He was a man on edge, his body tense with a quiet desperation. At the sound of her footsteps, he turned, his piercing gaze locked onto hers, intense and unwavering. "Nova," he said, his deep voice rough as he took a step toward her. She stood her ground, her expression cold even as her heartbeat betrayed her. "What the hell are you doing, Elias?" she demanded. "Canceling my shows, dragging me here, do you think I'm some puppet you can control?" Elias stopped a few feet away, his hands tucked into his pockets, his gaze never wavering. "I don't want you running anymore," he said, his voice soft but unyielding. "I gave you the chance to walk away, but you're still here, in my head, every moment." Nova let out a sharp, bitter laugh, turning her face away. "You're insane. I don't belong to you." But Elias stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat of his presence. And then, to her absolute shock, he did something she never expected. He sank to one knee before her. Nova's breath caught, her green eyes widening as he reached for her hand. "I don't want to own you, Nova," he said, his voice low and steady, his thumb brushing over her fingers. "I want you to be my wife. Let me give you a life where you never have to run again." The air in the room seemed to freeze. Nova stared down at Elias, the most powerful man she had ever met now, kneeling before her, his eyes filled with an honesty so raw it was almost painful. But she shook her head, pulling her hand away from his, her voice unsteady. I don't believe you. You just want to control me, like everyone else before you. I don't need your world, Elias. I need my freedom." She turned to leave, but Elias stood, grasping her shoulders, pulling her back. "I won't force you," he said, his voice rough, strained, "but I will prove that I'm different. I will protect you from your past, and I will let you create freely in my world. Just give me a chance." Nova wanted to resist, wanted to run the way she always did, but something in his voice made her hesitate. She fought with herself. The need for freedom had been her entire existence. Yet the growing feeling she had for Elias unsettled her. He wasn't like her family, wasn't like those who had used her before. But she was still afraid that if she stayed, she would lose herself. The silence between them was shattered when Elias's phone buzzed. His brows furrowed as he glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "What is it?" Nova asked, a wary edge in her voice. Elias looked at her, his gaze unreadable. "Your family, they found you." Nova went rigid, her blood turning to ice. "That's impossible," she whispered, stepping back. "They don't know where I am." But Elias's grip on her hand tightened, grounding her in place. "They know," he said gravely. "They contacted my team, demanding that you return to pay off their debts by performing for their company." Nova trembled, memories crashing over her endless performances, threats from her parents whenever she refused. "I won't go back," she choked out, her voice raw. Elias's jaw tightened, his grip firm but reassuring. "They won't touch you," he vowed, his steel-gray eyes burning with quiet fury. "I promise." The next day, Nova's family arrived at Kane Entertainment's headquarters. Richard Sterling, her father a harsh-faced man with cold, calculating eyes, entered the conference room, flanked by lawyers and a frail-looking woman, her mother. They demanded to see Nova. Elias stood at the head of the room, his stance imposing, his gaze sharp as a blade. "She's my daughter," Richard snarled. "She owes us. We invested in her talent, and now she has to repay us by working for our company." Elias let out a cold, humorless laugh. "She owes you nothing," he said, his voice like ice. "Nova is mine, and you have no right to demand anything from her." Richard opened his mouth to argue, but Elias raised a hand. A moment later, his assistant placed a thick folder on the table. "This," Elias said smoothly, "is proof of your exploitation. Illegal contracts, child labor violations. One phone call from me to the press, and your entire family will be ruined." The tension in the room was suffocating. Richard's face paled. He glared at Elias with seething hatred, but in the end, he had no choice. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed out, his entourage following silently behind. As the door closed, Elias exhaled, turning toward Nova. She stood in the corner of the room, her expression unreadable, emotion swirling in her green eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured. Elias stepped forward, gently brushing his fingers against her cheek. "I did it because I want you to be safe," he said, his voice quieter now. "Because I can't stand the thought of anyone hurting you." For the first time, Nova saw him not just as a powerful CEO, but as a man willing to protect her without demanding anything in return. Her heart clenched, but she still hesitated. Elias saw it, and he didn't press her for an answer. "Think about it," he said softly. "I'll wait." That night, Elias took Nova to the rooftop of his penthouse. Above them, artificial stars twinkled an intricate lighting system he had designed just for her. Nova stood beneath the glow, the soft light illuminating her silver hair, making her look like a fallen angel. Elias stepped forward, his gaze burning, but tender. "Nova," he said, his voice deep, steady, "I need you more than any success I've ever had." He reached for her hand. "Marry me, because I love you." Nova stared at him, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. For a moment, she battled herself freedom or love, running or staying. But then she looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw something she had never seen in anyone else, something real. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling. I love you too." A soft, almost disbelieving smile touched her lips as she nodded. "Yes, I'll marry you." Elias exhaled as if a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had finally lifted. Pulling her into his arms, he captured her lips in a deep, fervent kiss, one filled with passion, with promises, with something neither of them had ever truly known. And beneath the glowing artificial stars, two lost souls found their way home. Part 4. Marriage and Secrets Unveiled. The abandoned theater stood quietly in the heart of the city's art district, a forgotten relic that Elias Kane and Nova Sterling had transformed into a monument to their love. Elias had purchased the venue not for profit, but to turn it into the place where they would exchange their vows. It was raw, untamed, and uniquely theirs. The once faded walls were now adorned with LED strips that Nova had designed herself, weaving together crimson, violet and silver lights to create an atmosphere both romantic and mysterious. The music, crafted by Elias's top producers, wasn't a commercial hit, but an ethereal blend of deep electronic beats and haunting violin melodies composed just for them. There were no extravagant decorations, no hundreds of guests, no elaborate traditions, only a small gathering of close friends, fellow artists who had walked alongside Nova, and a love fierce enough to bind two lost souls together. Nova stood before the mirror in the dressing room, her emerald green eyes glimmering as she gazed at her reflection. Her wedding dress was as unconventional as she was sleek black silk that hugged her form, embroidered with silver streaks reminiscent of the lights she adored. The long, flowing train barely brushed the floor, and her naturally silver hair cascaded freely down her back. She needed no elaborate jewelry. She was already a masterpiece. Elias entered, disregarding the age-old superstition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony. He wore a simple black suit with no tie, his raven hair slightly tousled, and his steel gray eyes fixed on her as if she were the center of his universe. "You're breathtaking," he murmured, stepping closer, his fingers gently caressing her cheek. Nova smirked, her tone teasing. "You have no patience, do you?" Elias's lips curled into a smirk of his own. "Not when it comes to you." He pulled her into his arms, and for a moment, they simply existed, wrapped in the quiet intimacy that only they understood. The ceremony was brief, yet every word carried weight. Beneath the flickering lights, Elias and Nova exchanged their vows. "Nova," Elias said, his voice deep and unwavering, "you are the light that pulled me from the darkness. I will love you, protect you, and stand by your side until my last breath." Nova's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, "you are the home I never knew I needed. I will stay by your side forever." They exchanged rings, two silver bands engraved with tiny stars, and as they sealed their vows with a kiss beneath the glowing lights, the abandoned theater seemed to come alive, as if their love had breathed life back into its hollow walls. Their wedding night unfolded in a small loft within the theater, a space they had prepared for themselves. The room was intimate and warm, strung with violet LED lights that reflected off the dark silk sheets of their bed. Elias closed the door behind them, pulling Nova into his embrace, his lips capturing hers in a deep, unhurried kiss. "You're my wife," he murmured against her skin, his voice husky, his hands tracing the curve of her spine. Nova melted into him, her slender arms wrapping around his neck, surrendering to the storm of emotions surging between them. That night, Elias proved that his love was no longer about possession, it was devotion, unyielding and infinite. Every touch, every whispered promise, was a vow that he would cherish her for a lifetime. Nova gave herself completely, her love spoken through every breathless moan, every whispered confession. "You are everything to me," she murmured, looking up at him with luminous green eyes. They lost themselves in each other, in passion and love, as if the world beyond their embrace no longer existed. But happiness was fleeting. The next morning, Elias awoke early, the soft morning light casting a golden glow over Nova's peaceful face as she slept in his arms. He smiled, brushing a strand of silver hair from her cheek. But then his phone buzzed. His expression darkened as he reached for it. Reading the message, his jaw tightened. Horizon Media has issued an ultimatum. They have information on Nova and are threatening to expose it. We have 24 hours. Elias sat up slowly, careful not to wake her. But Nova stirred, sensing the shift in his energy. Her lashes fluttered open, and she immediately caught the tension in his posture. "What is it?" she asked, her voice still laced with sleep, but her eyes sharp with instinctive wariness. Elias sighed, handing her the phone. She took it, her fingers trembling as she read the message. Attached was a file evidence linking her to Horizon Media, a rival entertainment company from her childhood. The documents accused her of being involved in the embezzlement of millions from artists and investors, a crime Horizon Media now threatened to use against her unless Elias handed her over. The message ended with a chilling warning. "Turn over Nova Sterling within 24 hours so we can handle her for her involvement in the embezzlement case, or we go public. If you refuse, we will expose her past and fabricate additional accusations to destroy Kane Entertainment. Your stock will crash, and you will lose everything." Nova's face went pale, her hands shaking as the phone slipped from her grip onto the bed. "They can't do this," she whispered, her voice laced with disbelief and fear. But deep down, she knew they could. The media had always been her greatest fear, the flashing cameras, the relentless questions, the judgment of the masses. When she was younger, her family had shoved her into the spotlight, forcing her to answer press interviews about her talents when all she had wanted was to disappear. She had spent years running from that world, living in the shadows to avoid the unforgiving glare of the public eye. Elias took her trembling hands in his voice low but resolute. "I know. They're trying to frame you, Nova. But I know you didn't do this." She inhaled sharply, forcing herself to steady her breathing. "I didn't embezzle anything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I worked for them, I designed lighting for major productions. One day I accidentally saw internal emails and suspicious financial reports on my manager's desk transactions that didn't add up. They were funneling money from artists and investors through fake contracts. I never said anything because I was afraid. But they knew I saw, and now they want revenge. They want to make me the scapegoat." Elias's grip tightened, his gray eyes flashing with barely restrained fury. "They're afraid of what you know," he said, his voice like steel. "They think if they force my hand, I'll surrender you to protect my business. That I'll let them bury you the way your family once tried to." Nova swallowed hard, the memories of Horizon Media's corruption crashing back. The confidential emails, the falsified reports, the whispered conversations between executives that she had pretended not to hear. "I never planned to expose them," she murmured. "But they're still scared." Elias's expression hardened. "They won't get the chance." His grip on her hands tightened with quiet determination. "I'll handle it." They quickly devised a counterattack. Elias summoned Kane Entertainment's legal and tech teams to the abandoned theater, transforming it into a temporary command center. Nova sat beside him, tension in her emerald green eyes as the tech team began preparing to infiltrate Horizon Media's systems. Elias coordinated with his staff, crafting a media strategy to combat the false accusations. But the pressure escalated when Horizon released its first online article, accusing Kane Entertainment of harboring a dancer with a dark past linked to financial crimes. The confrontation with Horizon Media reached its peak the next day. Elias and Nova relocated to Kane Entertainment's headquarters as the situation spiraled further out of control. Horizon hosted a large-scale live press conference, broadcasting across every media platform. In the main conference room at Kane Entertainment, a massive screen displayed Victor Grayson, Horizon's CEO, a man in his 50s with slicked-back silver hair and a smirk dripping with malice. His voice oozed mockery as it echoed through the speakers. "Elias Kane thinks he can protect Nova Sterling? She's a thief, a traitor who worked for us and ran away with our secrets. But that's just the beginning. Kane Entertainment has been covering for her, embezzling investor funds, and using its power to bury the truth." A murmur of shock spread through the online press audience, and reporters fired off rapid questions. On the stock market, Kane Entertainment's shares began to plummet, dropping over 25% in mere minutes. Elias stood rigid before the screen, his face unreadable, but his clenched fists told a different story. He turned to Nova, who sat in the corner of the room, her hands gripping her head, eyes wide with terror. "This is my fault," she whispered, tears streaking her face. "I shouldn't have dragged you into this. The media, they're going to destroy me, Elias." Victor wasn't finished. He held up a stack of fabricated documents, his grin widening. "Nova Sterling isn't just a dancer. She holds secrets that could ruin Horizon Media's secrets she stole from us. Elias Kane thinks he can use her against us, but today we end this. Hand her over, Elias, or we'll release the videos and recordings, everything we have. We want her silenced before she can destroy us. And let this be a reminder, Kane Entertainment cannot win against us. If you don't give her up within the hour, your company will burn." The press erupted into chaos. Social media exploded with negative posts about Elias. Kane Entertainment's stock plunged another 15%, reaching a 40% drop in under 30 minutes, threatening to collapse the empire Elias had built. Major investors began pulling out. Phones rang off the hook. The walls were closing in. Elias felt the crushing weight of it all, but he remained unshaken. He moved to Nova, kneeling before her, gently tilting her face up to meet his gaze. "This isn't your fault," he murmured, his voice unwavering. "I chose you, and I won't let them take you from me." Nova stared at him, tears still falling, but then she inhaled sharply, and something in her eyes changed. Resolve, determination. "Elias," she said, voice shaky but clear, "they think I'm weak. They know my biggest fear facing the media. But I can use that against them. I'm going to expose them. Right here, right now." Elias froze. "Nova," he said, gripping her hands, "you don't have to do this. The tech team and I can handle it. You don't have to stand in front of the cameras. I know that terrifies you." But Nova shook her head. "No, Elias, I can do this. They expect me to run, but this time, I'll face them for you. You gave me the strength to fight back. Let me do this." Elias studied her, his heart tightening. He wanted to protect her, but the fire in her eyes told him that this standing up, fighting back was something she needed to do. Not just to save him, but to finally confront her past. "All right," he said, voice thick with emotion, "but I'll be right there with you." Victor's voice boomed from the speakers once more. "Your time is running out, Elias. Hand her over, or we'll release the footage Nova Sterling confessing everything on camera 10 years ago. She betrayed us, and now she will pay." Elias turned to his tech team. "Hack into their live stream. Use everything we have." Ryan, the lead technician, nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard. Nova stood beside Elias, recalling details from her time at Horizon. "They used an old password from when I worked there, Horizon Star 12. Try it," she said, voice unsteady but firm. Ryan typed it in. Seconds passed. Then, access granted. Elias's team hijacked Horizon's broadcast. The screen flickered, Victor's smug face vanished, and in its place, Nova. Her silver hair shimmered under the studio lights. The press fell silent. "My name is Nova Sterling," she began, her voice shaking then steadying. "I worked for Horizon Media when I was a child, under pressure from my family. They forced me to design stage lighting for major productions. They embezzled money from artists and investors, then discarded me when I was no longer useful. Elias Kane never hid me, he saved me from them. Horizon wants me silenced so I can't reveal the truth about their crimes." She turned to the camera, green eyes blazing. "But I'm done running. Here is your proof." Elias's team unleashed everything they had. The hacked broadcast displayed classified documents, illegal contracts, internal emails, bank transfers linking Horizon executives to financial fraud. Scandalous evidence, undeniable and damning. Nova continued, her voice growing stronger. "They tried to destroy Kane Entertainment with lies, but today I stand here despite my greatest fear to put an end to their deception, because the man beside me taught me how to fight." Victor's enraged shouts crackled through the speakers. He scrambled to regain control, but his system was locked out. The press turned against him. Journalists bombarded Horizon with questions. Horizon Media's stock plummeted, wiping out billions in minutes. Alyssa's stock rebounded, surging as the world rallied behind him and Nova. Victor's face went pale before the feed cut his empire crumbling before his eyes. The war was over, and Elias had won. As the screen faded to black, Elias turned to Nova. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, fingers buried in her hair. Nova smiled faintly against his chest, her tears falling for an entirely different reason now. "I was afraid, Elias, but I was more afraid of losing you." He tipped her chin up and kissed her deeply, fiercely, like a man who had almost lost everything. Not just his company, but her. And now she was his forever. That night in the theater that had become their sanctuary, Elias and Nova lay on their bed, violet LED lights casting stars upon the ceiling. "I almost lost it all," Elias murmured, fingers tracing gentle patterns against her skin. "But you saved me." Nova smiled, fingertips drawing slow circles over his heart. "No," she whispered. "We saved each other." They held each other close, knowing that no force in the world, no past, no enemy, no fear could ever come between them again. Part 5, Forever Together. The city still gleamed as brilliantly as the night Elias Kane and Nova Sterling first met, but now its lights were no longer just the flashing LEDs of underground clubs or the gleaming glass of Kane Entertainment's headquarters. Now it was the warm glow of the home they had built together, a modern house on the outskirts of the city, seamlessly blending Nova's light studio with Elias's recording space. It wasn't just a place to live, it was a testament to the love they had fought for, a space where art met reality, where freedom intertwined with commitment. Years had passed since their fateful battle with Horizon Media, since the day Nova conquered her greatest fear to protect Elias, since they forged a new life together. Elias was no longer the cold, distant CEO of Kane Entertainment. At 41, he still carried the same magnetic presence, his jet black hair now dusted with silver, his steel gray eyes softer yet no less intense. But he had chosen to step back from the empire he built, entrusting much of the company's operations to his team, dedicating more time to the role he cherished most, being a husband and a father. Nova, now 34, still carried the wild spirit that once defined her. Her silver hair had grown longer, her emerald eyes still burned with passion, but she had learned to balance art with motherhood, becoming a version of herself that was stronger and more complete. Their home was a living masterpiece. The ground floor housed Nova's lighting studio, where she designed elaborate stage setups, sometimes for independent artists, sometimes for Kane Entertainment. LED strips draped across the walls, old lighting rigs stood beside cutting-edge technology, creating a space that was both chaotic and harmonious. Upstairs, Elias's recording studio came to life with towering speakers, a sleek mixing console, and walls covered in Nova's light-painted artwork, a visual symphony of their journey. Between these two worlds was their shared space, a sprawling living room with floor-to-ceiling windows leading to a rooftop terrace, where they often spent time with their son, Milo. Milo Kane Sterling, now 5 years old, was a perfect fusion of Elias and Nova. He had inherited his father's dark hair, though streaked with silver from his mother, and his emerald eyes gleamed with boundless mischief. Milo was a born dancer. His body moved to music effortlessly, as if rhythm was ingrained in his soul. He was also sharp-witted, often bombarding Elias with questions about how sound was created, or asking Nova why lights change colors under her touch. He was the bridge between their two worlds, the living proof of the love they had built. One golden afternoon, sunlight poured through the glass windows as Elias sat in his studio, adjusting the final mix of a track, something he no longer did for mainstream success, but for the people who mattered most. The song was personal, created not for the charts but for Nova and Milo. Suddenly, the door burst open. Milo ran inside, his small feet padding against the wooden floor. "Dad, I want to do a performance," he announced, his green eyes shining. Elias chuckled, setting his headphones aside before pulling his son onto his lap. "A performance, huh? But a show's no good without your mom, right?" he teased. Right on cue, Nova appeared in the doorway, holding a freshly assembled LED strip, its violet glow flickering between her fingers. "What's this I hear about a performance?" she asked, amusement lacing her voice. Elias stood, setting Milo down before approaching her. "Our little star here wants to put on a show on the rooftop." Nova raised an eyebrow, pretending to ponder. Then she grinned. "All right, but if we do this, you have to dance, Milo. I'll handle the lights, and your dad takes care of the music. Deal?" Milo nodded furiously before dashing off to grab his gear, an old pair of dance shoes and a glowing baton Nova had made just for him. That night, the rooftop transformed into a stage. Nova set up her lights' LED strips draped along the railings, a small projector casting swirling stars against the night sky. Elias brought up the speakers, syncing them to his laptop, where a newly finished track played a soft electronic melody, inspired by the first night he saw Nova dance under the club lights. Milo stood in the center of the terrace, his shoes glowing beneath his mother's lights, ready to debut his self-created superhero dance. The music began. Milo twirled, jumped, and swung his light-up baton as if wielding a saber of pure energy. Nova adjusted the lights to follow his every movement, bathing him in hues of crimson and violet. Elias stood at the controls, watching with a smile, playing the proud audience. Laughter filled the air. Milo stumbled once but quickly got up, declaring, "I'm the light superhero," which sent Elias and Nova into fits of laughter. When the song ended, Milo sprinted toward his parents, wrapping his arms around Nova's legs before tugging Elias's hand. "Did I do good?" he asked, eyes wide with anticipation. Elias lifted him effortlessly, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Better than I ever imagined." Nova smoothed back his hair, her eyes full of warmth. "You're the brightest star, my love." Later that night, after Milo had fallen asleep on the terrace couch, Elias wrapped his arms around Nova from behind. They stood at the railing, gazing at the city skyline, the place where they had once been lost souls searching for something neither had expected to find. The wind tousled Nova's silver strands as Elias leaned in, whispering against her ear, "From one fateful night, you gave me the world." Nova turned, looking up into his eyes, her lips curving into a soft smile. "And you gave me forever," she murmured, placing her hand over his heart, feeling its steady rhythm beneath her touch. They stood there in silence, watching the city glow. The same city where they had first met in an underground club, where they had fought against Nova's past, where they had battled Horizon Media, where they had faced their own fears and doubts. Elias was no longer the man who thought love was a weakness. He was now a father who patiently taught Milo how to flip light switches, a husband who spent hours in the studio, helping Nova experiment with new lighting techniques. And Nova was no longer the girl who ran from everything. She had found her freedom not in isolation, but in the arms of a man who loved her unconditionally, in the laughter of their son, in the nights they spent creating something beautiful together. They weren't perfect. Elias still scolded Milo when he messed with the studio equipment. Nova still had days where she retreated into her thoughts, lost in the shadows of her past. But they always found their way back to each other. When Milo fell ill one night, Elias stayed up, holding him while Nova softly sang a lullaby she rarely used. When Nova struggled with a failed lighting design, Elias wordlessly entered her studio, turned on a song, and pulled her into a slow dance, melting her frustration away. Their life was made up of these small, beautiful moments. Lazy mornings when Elias made pancakes while Nova slept in. Afternoons when Milo doodled all over the studio walls, leading to laughter-filled cleanups. Evenings spent on the rooftop, staring at the stars, sharing new dreams. Kane Entertainment thrived, but Elias no longer prioritized it above all else. He let go of control, choosing to come home early instead to Nova and Milo. Their story closed on a peaceful night. Milo slept soundly in Nova's arms, and Elias stood beside them, holding both of them close. The city stretched before them, lights twinkling like echoes of the journey they had taken. From a chance meeting in a club, through battles fought against past demons and ruthless enemies, to a love that had survived it all. Elias leaned down, pressing a kiss to Nova's forehead before whispering, "I've loved you since that first night, and I always will." Nova's emerald eyes gleamed under the LED lights, her smile soft yet certain. "I love you too, Elias, forever." And beneath the artificial stars Nova had created, their love burned as brightly as ever, unyielding, unbreakable, infinite. Milo stirred between them, sighing contentedly. Their family was whole, their love eternal. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.